I will say sorry, but no, sorry. I love that when you asked how many people had never seen it for the first time, and a bunch of people raising hands. The rest of the audience booed. I mean, that's
It's now embarrassing not to have seen Airplane.
that's a great accomplishment.
Well, that brings up a question for me, which is, when did you guys know what you had? Because this was your first movie as directors. At what point in the process did you sort of relax and realize, oh, this is working, like we've really got a good movie here?
I think we were always too headstrong and too naive to know that, we could ever fail at it. So, we left Milwaukee, we didn't know anybody in LA, and when we saw 0 Hour, that was the basis for Airplane. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but if you go on YouTube and put in 0 Hour Airplane, it's scene for scene the exact movie. So, there's not much original that we did, except that, we put in the jokes.
Really, you should be interviewing Arthur Haley.
Genius writer. Yeah, he knew what a plot was, and he did. But I think when, after the first preview, I think we knew it was good. We had not the first preview, that was a disaster, but once we took it around to colleges, and it got really good laughs, so we were pretty confident.
Well, what happened at the first preview that was a disaster?
Well, this was on the Paramount lot, and the Paramount, it was the first cut, and we learned later that every first preview to a comedy is a disaster. You just don't know what's funny and what's not. And so the Paramount recruiter was supposed to get an audience for this Paramount Theater. It was all the executives. So he was incompetent, and so there was just about 30 executives sitting there with their hands folded, show me. So Jerry and Jim and I, in a panic, rushed out onto Melrose Boulevard and tried to drag people off the lines waiting to see Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days. And English was probably not their first language. And so they were all, so we got half an audience. Anyways, the thing pretty much bombed. And very few sparse laughs in the first half, and then no laughs in the second half.
But there was one guy who loved it, and he was cackling and laughing all the way through it. One guy, and we edited the movie to that guy.
That one guy. If we hadn't had that guy, the movie would be 15 minutes long.
It's unusual for a movie to have 3 directors credited. So how does that work? How does it work that the 3 of you can actually?
Well, it's not really that difficult. It's just we all some talk procedure and some work.
Good enough.
I've got to ask about the casting of this movie, because obviously one of the things that makes it work is the fantastic cast you've got. And I love all the old pros that you have, like, Leslie Nielsen, Robert Stack, Kenneth Tobey, Lloyd Bridges, all these guys, Peter Graves, who, some of whom, Leslie Nielsen, obviously, you guys revived his entire, gave him a whole new, career off of this. When you were casting those guys, did they understand what you were trying to do with this?
It was a mix. Leslie later said that I would have paid them to be in this movie. Leslie totally got it. He understood, that he needed to play it, straight. And not only did he understand it, but he relished it. But his comic timing is great. I mean, Leslie really was a classic comedian. I mean, it's amazing that he could do all these street roles all those years. After we met him, he's really a nutty guy, and I mean, that in the best sense.
And on the set, he had a fart machine that he played with, and it disrupted the whole set. He would try to crack up Bob Hayes and everybody. And then Peter Graves, on the other hand, read the script and threw the script across the room and said, "This is the worst piece of trash I've ever encountered, and in the worst taste." And later we realized, when we would give the script to actors read only their own parts. They don't read the whole script. So it may have appeared to him that he was playing a funny pedophile. But you know, our producer Howard Koch had Peter come in and meet with us, and so we convinced him to do it. And also his wife and his daughter said, "Hey, this is actually funny."
And on the other, and Lloyd Bridges really had, he's the one, he's great in the film, but we had to sit on him a lot because he, hold it down because he kind of wanted to be funny, and I totally understand it because it's hard to understand. I don't think anybody really understand what we were doing with the casting until the first day of dailies. We had a call from the studio and they said, "Oh, now we get it." But Lloyd was uncomfortable with it. He kind of always wanted to put a little spin on it. And I think in the end it makes a nice texture. But Stack, on the other hand, he would just say, you know, "Lloyd, just keep talking. We're the Stooges." But he got it and just and did it. And Peter Graves, I'm not sure if he's the greatest guy. And once he was in, he was just in for a penny and for a pound, and he would do, you know, whatever we asked. So it was kind of a range of you know, different sensibilities.
Were there any kind of veterans from that era that you guys approached who turned you down?
Anyone? Any veterans like Charlton Heston we approached, and Jack Webb, and Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. I mean, people may not remember who these people are now, but they were big names. And in fact, Leslie was not our first choice. He was like the fourth choice. And in fact, he was so unknown that I don't think we even knew what his name was. We knew we wanted the captain of the Poseidon, whoever that guy was. And so when we found out his name was Leslie Nielsen, and we were all excited. We thought he would be perfect because he appeared to be absolutely humorless. So we go to our casting director at Paramount, and who had already was brave enough to put his name as casting a comedy starring Robert Stack, Peter Graves, and Lloyd Bridges. And we said, how about Leslie Nielsen? And he says, Leslie Nielsen? Leslie Nielsen's the guy you cast the night before. We're only a month away from filming. So, but fortunately, our faith in that, it was like, he was great. And he turned out to be the best of them.
I was surprised reading your book to see that David Letterman was under, it seemed like somewhat serious consideration for the Robert Hayes role.
Yeah, we screen tested him actually.
We used to go see his act at the Comedy Store, and so we were fans, and we even had him into audition for a Kentucky Fried movie. And so we thought maybe he'd be good for Stryker because we were having trouble finding anybody, and he never wanted to do it. We forced him to screen test.
Well, I think his agent, come on, it's a movie, and it's a comedy, it's a good script, you should do it. And I think the thing about David is he didn't want to be an actor, and he isn't an actor. I mean, that's not his personality, and he can't fake stuff, But he was incredibly handsome, movie star handsome on screen, and he's got great timing. So it almost worked, but not quite. But I've never seen anyone so happy to be told that he didn't get the part. He faked us profusely, really.
Well, obviously Robert Hayes was perfect, but then there's that sort of scare in the book you talk about where there was actually a moment where you thought you were maybe going to get pressured to cast Barry Manilow.
Yeah, that was one of the studio suggestions. It was Barry Manilow, and also Bruce Jenner was a suggestion. And someone was behind, we don't know who, but he came in 3 times to read, and Jerry had to work with him, and so the first 2 times he came in to read for Stryker, and the 3rd time for Elaine. And we didn't know at the time that there may have been, other things operating.
When I was watching the movie again,
But he was always driving like a woman, so.
When I was watching the movie again a couple nights ago, I was wondering, so did you guys actually shoot some stuff at LAX? Because it seems like that's something you clearly now, in a post 9/11 world, could not do. I mean, what was the experience
At
like?
the old TWA terminal, and it was a problematic because they couldn't close down the terminal, so there were people walking through the,
Strangers eating our food too, yeah. But, you have to, it's hard to imagine LA in 1979, when it was the sleepy airport. I mean, it just wasn't anything like it is today with all the levels and everything, so we could get away with it.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and again, watching this movie, it's such a confident first feature, and you say that you guys kind of came out here and were fearless and everything, but how did you actually learn how to make a movie? I mean, how did you even,
Well, I think from Kentucky Fried Movie, we were, John Landis directed, and we were on the set every day and watching him, so we kind of got an idea of how it went, but really, I don't know that we so much knew how to direct a movie, is that we just knew what we wanted. We had I think sometimes I say to make a successful movie, you have to have a vision of what you want and you have to be right about it. And so we would just ask people, we weren't afraid to ask people stupid questions, how do we, about just how things are set up and how shots and the editing and all that kind of stuff. So our thing was just we knew how to make it funny.
And we kind of learned on the job.
Yeah.
And we also did our live theater, Kentucky Fried Theater, on Pico Boulevard in the 70s. And that's where we got the whole pace, because we weren't really actors, and so we didn't want to be up there on stage when the audience wasn't laughing. So we just had all jokes, and that's kind of what we did in Airplane.
Now, in the book it says that you had almost a year-long editorial process on the movie. Why did it take so long to edit it, and what was that experience like?
I'm actually not sure. It was, maybe it had something to do with the release date, and we just kept doing screenings and doing little, nips and tucks and more screenings, and I think we kind of drove the editor crazy because normally it's one director and editor and they talk about everything, but we would talk among ourselves and probably more use him just for the expertise of how you make something work when you want to get from one shot to another, and so I think eventually he found Jesus. Something he wasn't yeah, it was trying. But he was a great guy.
He's a great guy, good editor. But often his suggestions were always wrong. So one time we remember, Jerry and I were arguing about it, and it's got to be this way, got to this, and then Jerry says, Patrick, what do you think? And Patrick says, well, I would do it Jerry's way, and I go.
Okay, do it David's way.
And I feel like that's another interesting kind of challenge for first-time directors is, on the one hand, you want to take advantage of all this knowledge that people have. Everybody you're working with has probably made a lot more movies than you have. And on the other hand, you've got to kind of stick to your guns and know when the editor doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, is that just something that was intuitive or instinctive?
We had no problem speaking our mind because we had such a clear vision of, we were doing this kind of, had been doing this kind of humor for a long time. This whole thing of making fun of old film or television shows, and just the idea of playing it straight. For some reason, I don't know if it had to do with us all being from Milwaukee, or just something we developed together, but and by the time we got to do Airplane, we've been working on the script for so long, we just knew when it was wrong, when someone was making a face or delivering a line trying to be funny, or it just took too long to get from one thing to another, and the pace had to be faster. We just kind of, we disagree among ourselves a little bit, but then we always figure it out, and we'd all be happy with the final conclusion.
Well, I know I've got to wrap things up here because we want to get to the actual movie, but Dave.
Oh, that.
maybe people would just like to have us talk for the next night.
We can do that too. But before we get to the movie, we were talking about some of these, these interesting casting choices you guys made, and this movie sort of starts off this thing with you casting athletes. You've got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then David, you and Naked Gun cast O.J. Simpson. Just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that now.
I tell you the truth, I don't like to talk about it. All I'll say is, the last time I saw him was at the wrap party for Naked Gun 3. We shook hands, said goodbye. I sold him my knife collection, and I never saw him. I don't like to talk about it.
His acting was much like his murdering. He got away with it, but no one believed him.